Elias ran a hand through his sweaty brown hair. His borderline pallid skin was scorching in Rosier's midday light. It had merely been hours since the caravan's departure, and already this job had grown somewhat tedious. The wagon wheels were creaking, the man with the flail was breathing heavily, and the man with the axe smelled of cabbage and sweat. Elias figured he'd try to make the best of it. He turned to the nearest of his would-be colleagues and gave a small smile. The man with the axe nodded in response, a scowl painting his face. Only now did Elias realize how truly large this man was. He stood a head taller than the young man, who was fairly tall himself and was ridiculously muscular. His shaved head was covered in pseudo-tribal tattoos that probably lacked meaning. Elias, still maintaining his friendly demeanor, spoke with intent. "I do not believe we've been properly introduced yet. I figure if we are to share this road for an extended period of time, we should at least get to know one another, yes? I am Elias Thurlow. I hail from The burly man, who smelled of cabbage, waved a dismissive hand, cutting Elias off.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to meet yous, and whatnot. All that nonsense. I'm the Ox, and I earned that name from all the heavy lifting and mercenary work.
Elias pursed his lips, not quite expecting to be cut off so swiftly. This was going to be a long trip indeed. Well, the pleasure is all mine, Mr. Ox. I imagine we'll keep this caravan well protected, between our combined skill. Elias was now not so eager to carry on a conversation with this man, but he may as well finish what he started. The Ox merely nodded in response and turned to immediately start loudly boasting to the flail-wielding man, clearly uninterested in anything Elias had to say. The young Thurlow was part offended, but also part relieved. He turned the other direction to his other would-be colleague, the golden-haired woman, and gave her a nod and a smile. The woman turned to look at him. Her skin was fair, and hair was seemingly perfectly clean. She was notably tall, matching Elias's height, as well as lithe in build. Beyond all these features, the major thing that stuck out to Elias now upon looking at her was that she was no human at all. Rather, she was an Accieri. The tips of her sharp ears poked out from her long golden hair. Elias winced. His father always warned him of the deception of dagger ears. She eyed Elias with suspicion, a concerned frown upon her face. "What is it, Elias Thurlow?" Her voice was smooth and eloquent, but also hard and pointed. Elias was taken aback by not only her awareness of nearby conversation, but also her forwardness. It was a moment or two before he responded. "I was merely interested in getting to know some of my colleagues." The Accieri woman cut him off with a surprisingly genuine laugh. "I know. I heard your speech to the big dumb one over there. Don't force friendly relations with people you just met, Elias. Rather, I would say we'll get to know one another over this contract's inevitable month or so of tedious travel." Elias let out an uncomfortable laugh, now disheartened after noting her ears. "I suppose that is true." The woman offered, surprisingly, a curious quirk of an eyebrow. "What? You look worried."
"Oi!"
a voice shouted.
"Don't be trusting none of them oafies, boy. They've got knives as sharp as their ears, ready to stick into your back."
The woman showed a very clear sign of irritation with a grimace. Elias, in turn, winced in discomfort, before turning towards the invasive sound, immediately met with the sight of the burly man with the battle-axe, stomping his way toward the young man. Elias thought he heard a sigh of relief from the paunchy man with the flail, who the man with the axe had been prior loudly boasting to. Elias reached up, uneasily adjusting his gorget. Oh? The burly man walked right up to the duo before responding.
"Yeah!"
His eyes fell on the Accieri.
"You's planning to eat this here boy, ain't ya?"
His accusatory voice was so deep and imposing that Elias could feel it resonate in his ribs. The woman furrowed her brow, hiding her fear quite well. "Yes, I intend to drag him away and feast on his entrails. Is that the answer you wished?" Elias couldn't help but wince once more. The axe-wielding mercenary turned to look at Elias with a look of vindication.
She admits it! See? There's all snakes in the grass.
Elias met the man's gaze with a concerned quirk of his brow. He was shocked by the man's sheer incapability of understanding sarcasm, but he nodded in agreement, despite his discomfort. He could see the flail-wielder glance over his shoulder at them with a very clear smirk from the corner of his vision. The man grinned and bobbed his head at Elias.
Aye, see? Shock. He's afraid of you now.
He looked back to the woman with a mocking expression.
So, you gonna be a problem? Do I got to put you down here and now, before you's causing trouble?
The Accieri pursed her lips. Do you often ask your enemies if they deserve to die? She cocked her head. Because that leaves you open to attacks, you realize. The burly man squinted at her.
I ain't killing you outright 'cause you's hired on. Stupid!
The Accieri woman snorted. All right, I'll admit it. You're a brilliant mind who can see through the ruse of lying spies or something like that. But I would have your name if I could. The man tilted his head back, an expression of overwhelming smugness crawling across his features.
They call me the Ox.
The golden-haired woman furrowed her brow, the fear that showed deep in her eyes slowly being replaced with mischief. Oh? Well, that's a title, not a name, Sir Ox. The Ox raised his eyebrows. He seemed to snap back into reality after a split second.
Why should I go telling some elf bitch my real name anyway? You's gonna use it to steal my soul or some nasty business?
Elias gave the Accieri woman a concerned look before looking back to the Ox. I don't think she's a soul stealer, Sir Ox. The large mercenary looked back at him.
And you notice how? Look at you! You's as green as they come!
Elias winced. That was a little insulting, but nonetheless he proceeded as normal. By reading people. And that's how. The Ox, hearing Elias's words, broke out into sudden laughter.
Ha 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 ha! Reading people? That's the stupidest thing I heard all day. You can't read people? People write books?
Elias wasn't sure if he should laugh with the man. He was more overwhelmingly surprised by the whole confrontation to react in a apparent way.
Keep it down back there! What am I paying you for?
The merchant shouted from atop his wagon. The burly man looked up and gave a wave of his hand.
Sorry, boss. I'll go back to watching the road.
He turned to point at Elias.
Watch yourself round the Elfie boy. She's plotting to kill yous.
With that, the Ox turned on his heel and stomped back to continue boasting to the flail-wielding man, who didn't look too pleased to see the Ox return. Elias released a sigh and nervously diverted his eyes from the woman. He could hear incomprehensible grumbles from her, but little else.